Hello and welcome to the Pain Podcast. I'm the host, Tim Beams, and I've got Bart van Buchem with me. We're both pain specialist physios. And today the topic we are going to explore, we're thinking about the clinic actually, aren't we? We're thinking about being in our clinic and how we unlock lasting change. So we're interested in empowering people in their pain recovery.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And I've got a few sort of thoughts, scenarios in my mind, and they sort of relate both at a personal level, because I think everybody can relate to this, can't they? That let's say you are the sort of person that you get to New Year and you decide that you want to go on a diet or start exercising. And you come in with really good intentions. And if you're like me, you've tried things like that and you last maybe a week, 2 weeks. Maybe you're better. Maybe you last a month, 2 months. But many people drop off, really, really quick into that process, don't they? And it's something, again, like I'm just giving an example of me and my sort of personal journeys. Is there needs to be some sort of motivating factor, or there has been for me, in order for me to commit and to continue with that change. And something that I've changed over a period of time has been actually motivated by the way that I work with clients and looking at the world of behavior change and habit forming and things like that. So
it's a bit like practice what you're preaching, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I have and I'll tell people about the things that I've done. So I've committed to things like changing the way that I eat and how I eat and the food that I eat and how I prepare. And there's so much that's gone into my ability to make that a reality, including things like stocking the right food or positioning it in the cupboard or having it so it's visible. And there's there are so many parts to it that mean that then you can more easily reach and go, I'm going to take a healthy option and I'm going to take the the crappy thing that I know that my body doesn't respond well to, but it's ease and it's a quick fix and it's something that just gives me a sudden hit. So yeah, there's a bunch that I've personally taken from this idea of changing behavior. And I know I'm sort of stealing the spotlight a little bit here, but there's a lot from my personal journey that then I put into my clients. And there are things like being able to reflect and notice whether having made all those decisions and those changes has actually had an impact.
Yeah, it's interesting if you go through the process whenever you feel like you're doing the right thing, but it's still challenging to keep that behavior going, or even when it's normal, right? Then when does it feel like normal to let's say the different lifestyle, if you like? Sometimes reflecting on when my body tells me that I need to exercise instead of the other way around. So when is your body actually asking for doing something that is actually helping, instead of feeling tired or miserable and don't feel the necessity of doing that, which is really interesting how this change, this flip, and people asking me and myself, I'm also asking myself, what is that? When is it starting to be normal to do the right, whatever, I'm not sure saying the right thing, but the change, when is the change the new normal? Which is very interesting question, because I think we don't know, right? It's how much do you need until you're flipping into what is considered to be normal, like the baseline again. Yeah. And many patients will tell me, do I have to keep doing this breathing all the time? Or do I have to do this exercise all the time? Do I have to look after my posture all the time? Yeah. And it's interestingly how when exercise is turning to become the average or the normal, it's a very interesting question, and I don't have the have the answer, obviously, but you can see sometimes happening in treatment sessions when you actually people starting to notice that I haven't paid attention, but it seems to be all right, and which is probably a nice example of the fact that it may have changed over the time. So it's interesting how probably you can relate to that, Timmy.
Yeah. I tell, like as you're saying that, I'm thinking of the sorts of words that you also hear as well. That someone feels free, or like you said, it's like an unconscious process. They're not thinking about it anymore. So, but there's a lot that needs to happen in order for you to get to that point. And there are some specific skills I feel like we can help to develop with those people. And it's not that they don't have them. Or it's just about tapping into something and realizing the importance of it as well. Yeah, and yeah. So let's break down a few of the sorts of things that then that we might use in clinic. And I think the first one that we're probably talking about here is the ability to reflect. And what you said, what I'm really interested in is you people being able to sort of read and interpret what their needs are, and be able to respond to them. But I think that is that's a massive skill. But there's a lot that needs to come before that process to be able to know that I need to take myself for a walk. I need to sit down and just have some me time. I need to connect with others and have some sort of relationship with others, and the ability to be able to notice in yourself that that's a need for you, and it helps nourish you. That is a skill in itself. So what sort of ways do you go about creating the ability to self-reflect and notice then in people?
Yeah, well, there could be heaps of options you can use. I would say, like, there are a few examples, I guess, which we tend to use maybe deliberately or by training, like asking to people keep journals, some kind of peer review type of questions. So, what are other people thinking about you? Have you seen? So, you're asking people, like using a sort of a, let's say, practicing with supervision, asking your partner. For example, setting goals is a way of reflecting. So, where are you? Where do you want to go? And reviewing this, right? So, where do you think, concerning your goals, where you are? I love stuff to record, especially when it comes down to movement, because we are not very aware. Having this third perspective of watching your own movement by seeing yourself bending forward, for example. I do think we ask them, let's say, for feedback, basically on their own behavior. You could facilitate using mindfulness and more self-awareness practices. Have you noticed this? I love the example of what we're in a building in the clinic which is on a main road, so many people would have come across this road like many times because it's basically in the middle of the city. And how many times did you notice this clinic? I said, well, never. Well, you passed this building, it's pretty obvious, right? There are lots of signs outside, and so I've never seen it. And I even walked past it, right? Millions of times, because I walked the dog here, but I didn't notice it. So this is a nice example where people don't noticing stuff, but actually start understanding that they see, but they don't consciously go through, let's say, consciously seeing it. Um, yeah, I love tracking the process over time in different ways, using, like, for example, the reflective models you could use. There are a few available. I don't have to mention it, but there are many strategies that will guide you as a clinician.
Yeah.
And I think we should ask people, so what type of questions you ask yourself if you're assessing yourself? What are the type of questions you have to go through? And and I think that's probably a few ways of doing it, but there's not one single type or way of doing it. It should also fit your context. And what I found most interestingly in my training with my psychology background, which is that many people don't have the ability to reflect as a capacity. And it could be, well, their background, they never learned it. They may be able to learn it. It may be challenging for them because it has repercussions for them, and they're never told to be doing it. Some people just can't do it, which is maybe, and I think from a, let's say, chronic pain perspective, it's a significant number of people in your clinic will have trouble or won't have the same capacity as you have as a clinician to reflect, because we are trained to do it all the time. Yeah. And therefore we should not assume they can. So people need to be supported. And I do have patients who I'm supporting for years with reflecting all the time. And I know I will keep doing it probably for the rest of my career, as long as they consulting me. And some people take it on and do it within, well, maybe a couple of sessions, they got it, and their self-reflecting capacity is massive. So I believe I think reflection is probably the most important thing for behavior, for change, any type of change. You need some kind of reflection, whether it's consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I've got someone just jumps to mind, and he had a wonderful turns of phrases, but I remember him saying, this is the first time I've thought about or reflected on how things have been since I last saw you. But these sessions are wonderful for that. And I remember, he was just like my star patient of the time, and yeah, and maybe that time together is a wonderful opportunity to go through that process.
And perhaps even like the second session, the question: have you? What is it since the last meeting we've had, the last session? Is there anything that crossed your mind about this session? If they say, no, I'm starting to think about it just only recently when I sit here, that's fine. But it also gives you an idea of where people capacity sits in terms of their ability for the capacity for reflection, which doesn't say they're not interested. They're not there. And sometimes that's just it, right? But I can see many people you can facilitate to give them the tools to do it. For example, I want you to sort of set an alarm and to journal your day once a week or twice, whatever could work. So just to open up, to invite them to do it, not necessarily taking this is what you have to do for the rest of your life, but just like that little tool that can open up and they can find and experience the potential of reflection, just like your patient, Tim. You say, wow, these sessions are great. I never had something such like this, which is great if you can open up that experience and the potential benefit that people can have.
Yeah. So I've got a few thoughts here, because there will be people where you're introducing a self-reflective process, and you mentioned journaling, and some people are really comfortable with journaling anyway. It's something that I am cautious about sometimes as well, because if there are people who are focusing, I'm waking up every day and I'm still in pain. Do you want to journal, I'm still in pain, nothing has changed? And I've stolen an exercise from Sharon Goulbert called the 3 gifts, where we flip that journaling. So if it's someone's natural inclination is to check in daily, that we shift the focus towards the positives, the gifts, she calls them. Which is a really, and many people that I've done this with have absolutely loved it. The ability to be able to notice the positive moments in the day, even when most of your day might be awful. there are opportunities, and the opportunities to begin with might be quite challenging to think about and notice, like the warmth of sun on your face as you step outside, or just a 10 minutes peace when your children have gone to school, or there might be sort of, but when you then practice the checking in process, it becomes easier to notice those moments into the future, and there are layers of that as an exercise, but I've used that deliberately, particularly for people where we're trying to bring it in and notice that there can be, despite the crap and the awfulness, there can be positivity in those moments as well.
Yeah, just one bit. I hear what you're saying here, and I can see where this comes from. I think this will also but it requires trust from the patient. So this probably wouldn't be the first thing you're asking people to ask them. So, I'm so much in pain. And then you're asking, well, pay attention for let's say the exceptions. You might be not in pain as much as you think. So that will be sort of you don't want to, that shouldn't come across that way. But my experience, if you do this too early or without, let's say, drawing out that experience, what is it being like? So I'm always in pain, and you want to sort of saying, well, that's probably, there are exceptions, and that can be very helpful. I think within a therapeutic session, you probably have to provoke or sort of create a situation where people actually do experience less pain or different or change in their pain experience. And that will be the opening up. That will be the opportunity, the window of opportunity. So people are using breathing, for example, in their exercises, and actually now it's slowing down, but now it's easing a bit. And then you can say, well, that experience, you might have that during the day, even without knowing it. And I want you to pay attention to that feeling of the release, or that it eases. Only if it's only 1%, it might be important. But then you have the lived experience, and that is not competing with the feeling of, are you actually believing me?
Yeah.
And I think that's super important to sort of keep that exercises, do that in the right time, moment, and context, which would be, otherwise it can be like, the doctor telling you, well, what do you think, what's going on? Like, well, you're the doctor. And this is the same thing. People are trying to basically proving they are in pain. And even though you are believing them like 100%, the exercise can actually make that redundant and make that sort of, well, so creating that
I'm
distance.
hearing, and we've obviously spoken about this in other sessions, about the need to build trust, engage, create that relationship between the two of you. Absolutely integral here, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Totally. Yeah.
I've got a few other thoughts then coming from that, is that for some people it's natural to check in, and perhaps they check in a bit too much, and sometimes we can particularly when something has become quite entrenched, checking in every day, I don't find that helpful. And a preference for me for people like that would be looking at change over a bigger period of time. And we talk about broadening the lens, widening the lens. So it might be something. So yesterday, a conversation I was having with a patient was around sleep, and we were noticing sleep over a week rather than every day. How was sleep last night for you? It was like, how has sleep been over the week? And what she was saying is, overall, I've noticed sleep's been better. There's been a couple of really bad nights, but overall, compared to the previous week when we spoke, where every night was awful. So that the ability to broaden, to widen that lens for some people is really important. And that lens might not be a week; it might be a month, it might be over 6 months. Depending on how entrenched and how how much a part of that person's life pain can be, and to look for those gains and those changes over a period of time can can be really key. And I think that would fit into where I wanted to go, which is the notion of setting like little small targets or goals or I mean, there are different ways of describing this, aren't they? But certain things that you're aiming for, you're looking to work towards and achieve. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm still figuring out, I guess. But what I think, just let's say from a behavioral change and CBT type of approach, you would rather setting goals on skills than compared to let's say your ability to meet some type of whatever length, or I said it, some kind of distance, or less pain, or less fatigue, or more energy. Would be slightly more positive, I guess. That would be an option, but it should be something that is achievable, and therefore by putting in the effort, you will exceed your, or you will at least you will meet your goals. I think that's very important. So instead of less pain, you would be saying, let's go back to the breathing thing. If you want to implement that, and there is some benefit of that because it's been proven during the session that you're trying to check in your breathing on a daily basis with a certain type of strategy or whatever exercise. By doing that, you're meeting your goal. So it's a skill goal. So being able to do that every day, or to do that even when you're in you're sort of in the train, or when you're sitting there in your working place, or taking breaks during the day instead of sitting there and keep holding on, cramping and spasms, but lying down and doing it, because you basically can tick off, I've done it. The result is likely, so that's what I think, that's our clinical reasoning. It's very likely if people change that, they will feel better, but that's not the focus. The goal will be you'll meet your goals when you do it, instead of what the result will be. I think that's very much more encouraging, because you can, from a, let's say, the complexity of pain and human experience is that we probably have to do more than just one thing to change anything. Also comes down from the predictive processing ideas of how much change do you need to facilitate change, and therefore the model is going to change. And I don't see there's reason to stick with the end goal of having something on a, how you say that, that the end goal of like less pain will be the result of doing all these things differently. That's what we trust. And I see there's a big opportunity there to keep. So what is it, how you reflect on the week? So it's basically what you've done, how you experience it. Does it feel comfortable or uncomfortable? Is it something you can actually include or implement in your life? Is it doable? And therefore you get more I would say, more pragmatic approach within exercises and behavior change. And I feel quite comfortable doing that, even though people are saying, well, my pain is not changing. It's, well, probably because it needs to be done much more, which is fine. And you're working on it step by step. That's the other thing about goals. You probably have to create little skill goals that probably all together being or making the difference.
Yeah. And I mean, perhaps this is one for another session as well around goals. They have to be something that's meaningful, I think, for someone, don't they? And see value in doing it. Otherwise, why would you bother doing it again and again and again and again? So that I'm going to park that a second, because I wanted to sort of note. I wanted to take note of this, and because I think this is an integral part of pain. Is and rehabilitation and treatment is that a lot of what people do are doing it to get rid of pain or to feel better. It's like let's push it away, push it away, push it away. And a big part of behavior change relating to long-lasting change with pain that I see is you're creating the condition of well-being. And that isn't necessarily going to have a immediate effect and change in how someone feels. But as you were saying, as you repeat a process and it becomes a part of habit and how you live your life, you start to create the condition of wellness or well-being or health, or this, which would be a salutogenic model, wouldn't it? It's a focus more on well-being and health than it is on disease and disability and an inability to be able to do what you can do. And there's a rich environment there for us to work in things like, as you said, goals, in things like journaling, in things like noticing someone's language, in the ability to be able to be more solution focused and think about what values you have and what's meaningful and what you desire, and that to me is like, oh wow, there's such richness there that we can tap into.
And there's this notion of that it needs to be different enough compared, because if you're in a cycle of, let's say, behavior or thinking, I think it's very compelling that every type of therapeutic approach should sort of facilitate enough change. If it's too much of the same, if it will be too much, let's say, it doesn't create any error, it doesn't create any chaos in the system, it's very unlikely that something is gonna change, right? Anything. So usually you're seeking for a significant change by, for example, with using expectation, a violation of expectation, sometimes telling the opposite, doing it like totally different, and therefore using an experiment to demonstrate that. And I often refer to the notion of that people can refer to something weird happens, something is different, it doesn't feel normal. That's probably where you have to be. If it doesn't feel normal, then I would say that the system is still sort of trying to calibrate and trying to find probably its comfort again, because that's what we like. But it doesn't, if it's changing or different, it doesn't have to feel. And I like the meaningfulness bit in it, because it's sort of going back to what is actually meaningful, because people losing their meaningfulness in their lives. Although for some people, they just have to reinvent meaningfulness again. So by experimenting with all types of meaningfulness, I would say you have to figure out something, find a new hobby, finding new, doing exercises you never done, meeting people you never met. Could be another way of going, not necessarily going back to where you came from, but maybe creating a new sense or a new experience that you never had before. And that will be, most typically, that will be the people that are saying, wow, this is like something happened, something magical. This is where my life flipped to a new era, if you like. And these are often reporting massive differences in how they experience their life. And I think acceptance commitment therapy does have a lot of those, that if it's very effective, people do find something very different that's meaningful to them because of the process that has gone through. But probably not everyone needs to go through such a rigid process of finding something different. But I think meaningfulness is probably it would make sense to me. I would never let people do things they deliberately hate in terms of doing what you don't like to do. Well, you can do things what you don't know how it feels, and it may be a good experience or rather a bad experience, but we can figure that out. You don't have to repeat stuff that you don't like deliberately or doesn't feel right all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, difference noting is important. I mean, it comes back to that self-reflection as well, doesn't it? What I call this disrupting. So sometimes you need to disrupt and experience something that's different. However, by disrupting, that does run the risk that you might do something that is a bit too much or might make you sore or have a repercussion. And for some people, that can feel very much like a setback as well, can't it? And I think it's important as well. I mean, we talked about the sort of preparation, the setting the ground. But if you are going to do something like that, I think it's important to even predict it. So we had this chat earlier, but I premise this with it's likely that things might get a bit worse or they might not feel great. And actually that isn't you doing something wrong. It's us learning more about you and these opportunities for learning of change but even to be able to notice that things are changeable, even though change isn't in the direction that you want them, is an important part of the change process for people.
Absolutely. I like that.
I stole it from a patient. He was brilliant. He was like, it's like I'm disrupting my life, Tim. And I remember it was a really simple thing for him. It was just when he had a shower in the day, and that shifted his whole routine around the ability to be able to have a conversation with his wife at that time when he wasn't ordinarily, and that shifted the whole relationship. So disruption can be a helpful part of a process.
Absolutely. Maybe necessary to if you get stuck. Chronic pain is typically getting stuck. It's even the chronicity implies that getting stuck. And what makes you get less stuck or open up again? Probably disruption is a very strong feature of I would say, and maybe that's something that if you probably disruption is required to facilitate change, and the question is how much disruption can you facilitate and is ethical or it would be doable. And I think that's a great question. I think that's the gut feeling of how clinicians work, right? This is where do we balance in between the notion of having, let's say, disrupting but not too much.
Okay, so unfortunately we're coming to the end of the session, aren't we? But I feel like we've got another 2 or 3 that we should do around here, because I'm also thinking about how we maintain change over a period of time. So I'm going to log that for another session, but I'll do my best to summarize. But the first thing we were introducing is the ability to unlock lasting change and how to empower people in their pain recovery or in their journey, however you want to refer to it. And an important part of that process we were discussing, I mean, past the building a relationship and rapport and everything, but was the ability to create self-reflection and reflective processes. Journaling was an example. You talked about, you didn't call it embodied practices, but noticing in you as well. So embodied practices. We talked about the benefit and of journaling, but also of noticing wider time points as well. So instead of focusing down, I introduced the notion of journaling gifts, journaling the positives, because we can do a brilliant job of noticing all the bad stuff, can't we? In fact, humans are awesome at it. So being able to bring in and welcome some good into your life is a skill in itself, particularly when things are particularly bad. We talked about some goals and values and intentions and meaning, we dropped in some ideas around language, although I think we can talk about that in a lot more detail. I'm interested because you mentioned the word predictive processing, but again, I think this is something for us to expand on in later podcasts, that we have sort of this model of the world, and within that model of the world are expectations about how things are going to be, and it might include experiencing pain in my world, and if that's the case, then it's important to challenge those expectations, and disrupt those expectations. Might be a necessary part of the ability to make change possible in someone. Otherwise, they're just going to repeat and repeat and repeat. And something that we're understanding about the weight given to expectations is that they become so strong that even though there's evidence that something else can be, so someone can feel something different to pain, for instance, the weight of evidence is so great against that being the case that it will never be. So being able to introduce the ability to notice that something could be other is important, and that, I think, comes back and supports the notion of things like the self-reflection and the noticing, and as integral parts of a therapeutic process, not as an add-on, but as a necessary part, that you might, to begin with, be supporting some people more, you were saying, and for some people over a long period of time. And even the session that you're having might be that specific and deliberate process of being able to reflect. And obviously there will be some people who have that skill and are awesome at it and run with it really, really well. Did I miss anything?
No, that was a big summary.
Yeah,
we discussed a lot.
Awesome.
Sorry for that. No, I think there was a lot in here. It's good, and I think we touched on so many topics that they're in a clinical confidence series you've been recording. I think we're able to sort of get the whole package, but there's so much more to discover, yeah, it would be nice to see you on our website. Have a look. I would say there's a lot that sort of gives you a little sneak preview. Go check it out on thepubscientific.com, and we are growing. We're growing massively, so it's great. So we've got so many clinicians jumping on board, which is great, and very excited. If you have any suggestions for things that you feel like we need to discuss or need to address, please let us know. Just send an email to info@lepubscientific.com or through the website. Leave us a message. We will be grateful to have some of your feedback. We already get this, so these sessions are driven by you guys. So please leave us your challenges, and we will reflect and try to give you some support in this journey. So thank you for listening again.
Awesome. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye.